Another fun piece of information that we might want to give to our player is, where exactly are they in the world? We gave them this huge map with all these cool islands, but it can be a bit difficult to navigate, especially when you're driving because you're not able to move the camera. So one thing that we can do is create a mini map. To start, what we need to do is in our hierarchy here, we need to right click, select UI, and select canvas. This will serve as our player UI canvas. Later on, when we add our player UI elements in week 4, you can add them to the same canvas. What we need to do here is right click on the canvas, select UI, and select raw image. Not image, but raw image. This is important because raw images have this texture field. And one thing that we want to make sure, if we click on our game view, you'll see that this raw image starts out in the very center of our screen, and that's not what we want. What we want is it to be kind of in the corner. So we can actually move our camera. We can even press F to zoom directly on it and move it around. I'm going to move mine down into one of the corners on the bottom. You can pick any corner, whatever works for you, but just make sure you check on the game screen that it's occupying somewhere that's on screen but not right in the middle. And I'm actually going to scale mine up a bit because I'd like it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to press the R key and use the scale tool and drag it out to around a size of 2. Yeah, that looks good to me. What we then want to do is go into our Techability folder in the assets thing, open up Bonus, and you'll see this black Minimap object. That's exactly what we want. We're going to click on our raw image and we're going to drag this Minimap thing onto our raw image in the texture field. And that's going to make it turn clear. This Minimap thing is actually what's called a render texture, and it's going to allow us to draw images from a camera onto the render texture. So what we need to do next is create the camera to do that. So we're going to click into our player pirate here, and we're going to right click, and we're going to go all the way down to camera. And that's going to create a new camera separate from our main camera. And for this one, we're going to rename it to Minimap Camera. And we're also going to click down to our raw image and rename that to Minimap. That's just to keep things a little more organized for us. Next, we need to click on our main camera, and we're going to move this thing way up in the air. Let's say we'll give it a Y of, let's say, 150. Yeah, that'll do it. And then we want to rotate it around the x-axis 90 degrees, so it's looking straight down onto our player and his ship. And we also want to change our projection from perspective to orthographic. And you're going to see it's going to look like it's zooming in, but what that's really doing is changing it so that instead of viewing it as a 3D object, it's now viewing the entire world as basically a 2D image. But we want to get a little bit more information than just a direct view on our player. And to do that, we need to expand the size of our camera here. So in the size field, we're going to change that to, let's say, 15, or not 155. We'll say 50, 75. I think 100 looks good. I think that's nice and big. That gives us a nice large view of our map here. And we want that to be a child of our player because we want this Minimap camera to follow our player around in the world. So this is great. This already, if you look at the game view, this actually takes up our whole screen. We don't want that. So we need to click on our guy here, and let's see. What happens if we drop the scale back down to 1? Does that help? Nope, we are still occupying the whole screen. So what else can we do here? Dropping the width, does that help? Nope. Oh, wait, I know what's happening. It's just that this camera is drawing ahead of this one, and that's not what we want. We want to display the proper camera. And that's because you see here it says target display. That is partially correct. We do want it to appear on display 1, but we actually need to drag our render texture, the Minimap texture here, into this target texture thing. And then you'll see that's going to drop it right down onto that image on the right. So we need to actually blow our thing back up here. So I'm going to increase that scale back up to 2. And now in our game view, we see we have our camera down here. So if your Minimap is covering your whole screen, you just have to remember to drag that render texture onto target texture here. Um, and this is great, but its main limitation is that we really can't see our player at all. So what we want to do is go into our player pirate, and we're going to drop this map icon placeholder right onto our player pirate. And that's going to create a sprite renderer, which is an object that allows us to draw an image in 3D space. So we want to center that on our player. So we're going to set this to 0, 0, 0 on the transform. And if we go back to our map icon here, you'll see it's now centered on our player. We want to rotate it 90 degrees around our x-axis so that the arrow is pointing in the direction our player is facing. We then want to blow the scale up a lot. And we're going to want to switch back to our game view while we do this because we want to set it to a scale where it's very clearly visible in our mini-map in the bottom left. So let's try 10. Let's see, how does 10 look? So we'll set the X and Z scale to 10 and the Y scale to 10 as well. And I think that's pretty good. It's clipping into the beach a little bit, but that's okay. So that's good. We'll keep that. Next, we want to crank this thing's Y height up so that it's way above everything else, and we don't have to worry about it getting clipped by some of the islands or the buildings or things we walk into. So we're going to give this a Y position value of 75. And that's going to keep it well below our camera at 150, but high enough that we won't have to worry about it colliding with anything else. And now if we go back over to our game view, you'll see that that little arrow is drawn above everything at the top. The last thing that we need to do is add a layer. So we need to put our map icon placeholder here on a layer that will not be drawn by our main camera, but will be drawn by the Minimap camera. So we're going to click on the layer drop down here. We're going to hit add layer, and we're going to say Minimap. And then we're going to select our map icon placeholder here, and we're going to select that Minimap layer, and then select our Minimap camera, and we're going to click, or that's going to stay drawing everything. But on our main camera, we want to make sure in culling masked that Minimap is not selected. That way we can't actually see that icon from the main camera that the player is viewing from, but you can see it from the Minimap. And then once you have all that set up and ready to go, if you hit play and start moving around, you'll see you now have a little mini-map in the bottom left that shows you where you are on your island and where you are relative to everything else. And luckily, our boat is nice and big, so you can see it in the corner there. That helps us keep track of where our boat is relative to us as well. One thing that we need to do with our mini-map camera before we continue on to the next week, though, is we need to get rid of the audio listener. By default, any cameras that we add to our scene get this audio listener component, and we already have one on our main camera, and that's what we want. So we just need to open our Minimap camera, look in the inspector, and hit remove component on that audio listener component.